Buenos Aires. Flashing lights on the street, the rhythm is jumping. Gringos in town and everybody is humping. From the north to the south we're making some noise, showing the world we got the soul and the poise. Gringos in Buenos Aires.
With us here today is an Australian, he's a historian and a podcaster. Let's welcome Daniel.
Good evening.
How you doing, Daniel?
I'm fine. Nice to be here.
Nice to welcome you on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. This is my first Santa Rosa storm.
This is a Santa Rosa storm?
I believe it is
Well,
a Santa Rosa.
you're a historian. You must know it's Santa Rosa.
Well, I'm told it's a Santa Rosa. I only heard about Santa Rosa last night when a friend warned me about travelling here from San Isidro. And it's my first Santa Rosa, and it's pretty rugged.
So you're originally from Australia? What parts?
I'm from Southeast Australia, so there's a pointy bit right at the bottom of the continent called South Gippsland. And I live just near a small town in South Gippsland, but I'm originally from Melbourne.
From Melbourne, okay. I have a friend who lives in Wollongong. Wollongong.
Okay.
All right. Are you familiar with that area?
I know of Wollongong. The area around there is exceptionally beautiful. Subtropical rainforest and lovely beaches, but quite crazy weather at times.
His name is Cesar. Do you know him?
No, I don't know him, I'm afraid.
People always expect us to know whoever they mention that lives in that place.
Certainly, yes.
I'm from Philly. Oh, I have an aunt who lives in New Jersey. I said, oh, I know her. You know, it's like... But anyway, okay, so what brought you to Buenos Aires?
Well, actually, my son speaks Spanish. He's 9 years old, and we brought him to Buenos Aires to do go to school here for a school term. So he never forgets his Spanish, and he gets to experience a life that's radically different from the one he has at home.
Does he go to a bilingual school in Australia?
He goes to a bilingual school in Buenos Aires. In Australia, it's a totally monolingual school.
All right. And where did he learn Spanish?
What we did was when he was very, very young, we introduced him to television in Spanish.
Wow.
So kids will watch a fly crawling up the wall if it's on the screen. So we basically banned all English on the TV, so only Spanish on the TV. So he grew up with Mexican and American children's TV shows and Argentine TV shows, which are like Plim Plim, that creepy clown who's actually really good at teaching kids Spanish. And he learnt Spanish from there. We played Spanish music, and it became like his thing rather than something that we made him do.
And why Spanish and not Italian or French or...
Well, it's such a user-friendly language, especially if you're an English speaker. There's this amazing cultural nexus thanks to the United States, which has 57 million native speakers. And they've created this thing with Mexico, this nexus, and so has a familiarity about it. Also, the content that's available because of what comes out of Argentina, what comes out of Mexico, and what comes out of the United States, the most terrific, wonderful content for learning the language. So also I think it's got the largest native speaking amount of people in the world of any language, so it's bigger than English in terms of native speakers. So, and also, look, I did French for 7 years at school. My mother was a French speaker. I knew less French when I finished those 7 years than when I came. I go to France, I can't use it because it's wrong. Everything I say is always wrong.
Yeah. And they'll spit at you. They spit on you if it's wrong.
Exactly. Look, we found it in Argentina, but with Spanish speakers especially, they love you having a go, and they're so forgiving, and they really try to understand you, and they're really, really encouraging. So, but my son's Spanish is terrific, so he doesn't actually need that much encouragement.
Congratulations. Yeah. That's congratulations. It makes me wonder, there are more Spanish speakers in the United States than there are in Argentina.
Yes, it's remarkable.
That's incredible. And so you're living in San Isidro now?
Yes, we're in San Isidro.
And why San Isidro, not the city?
Well, we came to scout for schools in 2023, in the summer of 23, which was a particularly vicious summer here. It's like 40 degrees almost every day and blackouts. And we were in Belgrano, and I love Belgrano, but my kid hated it. And he said, I'm just not doing it. And we couldn't do much. And the security there, it's not as safe. And so and he's used to the country. He can see the sea from his classroom window, and
is he going to the Lincoln School?
We couldn't afford the Lincoln School, I'm afraid. But it's a very good school, but it's also, I don't think it's bilingual. I think it's just English language. Yeah, so that would sort of defeat the purpose. So he said no, and I said, give us a go. We'll reassess. And so he likes cold weather. So I came back last winter by myself, not speaking Spanish, looking for schools, and we found there was a brilliant school in La Plata. La Plata's love La Plata, and I went to see the school, and the play yard was more like a prison. And the only thing missing from a lot of the schoolyards in Argentina is guys with tats lifting weights. And there's just nothing organic or green. And so I looked at lots of schools, and some of the fancier ones, which we probably couldn't afford in retrospect, rugby was compulsory. So that was, we vetoed that, the whole rugby thing, because not into it.
Save on medical bills.
Exactly. And my wife's a Kiwi, but she agrees, rugby's probably not appropriate for our kid. And so we looked, and we found this gorgeous little school in Acasuso, which is near the river, and it's green, and San Isidro it feels safe, and it's incredibly friendly. And in terms of, if I had anyone was going to ask me, where should I live if my kid is coming here, I'd say San Isidro area. It's ideal. So my son really loves it there.
Oh, right.
It's friendly, it's quieter, it feels safer. I'm not worried about motochurros all the time. So
yeah, sure, motochurros. And so you've been here since 2023?
We were here for just 6 weeks, and then we went home with our tail between our legs pretty well, school-wise. Then I came back last year just on an intensive school hunt and found the school. And we came back, planned it ahead, and joined it. So it's only one term.
Okay. And what do you do in your spare time? What do you do for work? What do you do for fun?
Well, we had an ice cream business, and
where?
In Australia.
In Australia.
So we manufactured artisan ice cream, and we sold the business. And my wife works as a disability support worker now, and I decided, I used to be a journalist, and the whole journalism game sort of got killed. It's not what it used to be.
Nothing is what it used to be.
So I decided podcasting was the go. And so I've started doing this is my first podcast series. I've got one episode down. I've got to do more before I can release it. And I've been researching this podcast for forever. So my background academically was I did politics and history. And it was... I didn't know anything about
You're
South
a historian.
America. I'm a historian, yes. I've been studying history all my life. Specifically at university, I concentrated on Central and Eastern European history. So I was a Ukraine expert.
Ancient history or modern history?
Modern history. Generally modern history, but in terms of Ukraine, I was focusing on Ukraine and Poland and Russia, basically from, around the 8th century to the 21st century. So pretty well focused on those areas.
What do you like about, is there anything you like about Argentine history?
Well, I think, like many Australians, we have a scandalously poor connection with Argentina and Australia, even though both countries have so much to offer each other. And there's been a bit of writing that they're like sisters that took different paths. I think they're more like sort of cousins, but there's a lot of symmetry between the two countries, and we just don't have that. We have much more of a connection with Europe and Asia and the Middle East, and there's not much connection with that. And I knew
It's
very
really far away. Australia's on the other side of the world.
true, but we
that's
have
one thing
so much. We're in the same
It
hemisphere.
keeps us apart in a way.
I guess it does, but we're in the same hemisphere,
Yeah.
and we've got a lot in common. Economically, we did in terms of, but I really knew very little about Latin American history, and then when we were looking to come to Argentina, I looked into it, and it was like, wow.
A lot of history.
This is incredible. And sort of South American history is really complicated, like really Russian history is actually reasonably easy because nothing's much has changed in 1,000 years. They're still run by a pack of, the same sort of people that were running it 1,000 years ago. I'm using a bit of poetic license here, but in terms of, there's a lot of continuity. In Latin American, it was so complicated. And then looking at Argentine history, it's like, wow, this is incredible. So I've just taken this massive deep dive into Argentine history, and I thought, and I looked at podcasts.
Where do you start? Where do you start when you, if you want to understand and learn about Argentine history? You start from the very beginning, from San Martin, for example?
Well, I believe you start with Isabella of Castile.
Isabella Católica.
Yeah, so it's my idea. I believe if you want to understand the way Argentina is today, I think you've got to go right back to Castile before there was a Spain, and the system that Isabella, who I call the most consequential woman in history, she built a system, and that system was exported to the New World, and I think that you can see there's a direct line that you can see from the system she exported to the way things are now and how things developed. So in my podcast, I start with recent history in Argentina so people understand sort of where we are roughly now, and then I go right back to medieval Castile. Because it's not generally known, Spain's first colonies were in the Canary Islands, and they developed this whole system in the Canary Islands. It was the laboratory for empire, and when they colonized South America, they basically took that system that they'd built in the Canary Islands and transplanted it to Latin America. So that's why you have to go all the way back. And if you look at provinces like Formosa, which, the feudis, you can see that these are almost feudal. It's not a modern political system there. It looks almost, it's sort of early modern. So, yeah, I go all the way back. But I started, the greatest hits, it's obviously Juan Perón and Evita, and you look at them, and it's really, really interesting. And I took a deep dive there, but then I just kept on going back and realised I had to keep going back, and I ended up in medieval Castile.
That's wow, fascinating ride. Yeah, and speaking of Perón, what do you know about the Perón and that whole movement in the modern time?
Do you mean what's called Peronism now? Mm-hmm. Well,
maybe the information you get is different from the information they have here.
Well, I'm a political scientist, but I'm not trained in. You would need, I think, more expertise and more understanding. But from a amateur looking at it, they might call themselves Peronists, but what exactly does that mean? It doesn't seem to me. I can't see it's the same as, firstly, what was Peronism anyway? Which is what I'm going to be talking about in my podcast. I call Juan Perón, I've got a nickname for him now that I just got, Juan the Pontificator, but he was like a political magpie, and he just would grab something a bit of fascism, a bit of, the New Deal, and he'd built this political nest like a magpie, and it's an interesting question. I want to talk to experts about it. What did he actually believe in? Because in some ways he seemed quite a hollow man. And what did he believe? I don't know what he actually believed. He seemed to be a guy that if he saw a dog with a limp, he'd go and pick up the dog and be really nice. But at the same time, he'd put feminist intellectuals in jail with prostitutes. So you send guys with cattle prods. He had pretty fearsome secret police. So what did he believe in? Did he... all the, some of the wonderful social welfare reforms that he did he believe in them, or was he building a political constituency? So I actually don't know the answer, and maybe people that know more can tell me that.
Sure.
But to me, Peronism, what I see now, is like an amorphous term for people of the left here. Not quite communist, maybe a bit to the right of communism, but it just seems to be a catchphrase for those of the left.
Yeah. Well, you have to, like you said, you have to study political science and be more than a historian. You can read history from the history books, but the political scene, you live from within, from actually experiencing governments and whatnot.
It's really, it's quite complicated. You do need some expertise. Yeah, what in the modern context, what is Peronism? I can't properly answer that question. I'm looking forward to people that know more than me being able to tell me.
Huh. All right. Have you ever worked as a historian? Have you worked in university as a teacher?
No, I never worked as a tutor or anything. What I did was when I was doing my postgraduate studies in political history of Ukraine, I went to Ukraine, lived in Ukraine, and I worked as a journalist in Ukraine. So I can say that I used what I learned, and that was my edge there, because I didn't speak the language. I spoke this terrible mixture of Ukrainian and Russian, which was awful, but I got the job done. I could sort of survive, but you can't understand Ukraine. You can't understand what's going on there. It's really potent history. Argentina has a really potent history too, and I had a very, very good grasp of the history, and that was my superpower over there. So I was able to look at angles that other journalists couldn't, and so I used it there, but I haven't worked as a tutor. What I studied at university, it's all been cut. So we had social sciences department, humanities, and it's all gone now. Like the things that I studied, it's gone.
Could you see yourself working as a history teacher here if the opportunity presented itself?
In Argentina, well, besides the language and the bureaucracy here, certainly not, because history is so politicized here. So it's really hard. I'm looking for historians for my podcast to talk to. So if there are any English-speaking historians out there that would like to come on my podcast, I'd love to talk to you. The next one is about Juan de Solis, which is not controversial. It's a whodunit story. Petro Mendoza, it's not really controversial, but as we go to around the times of independence onwards, Argentine history is incredibly politicized. Like, I've had historians tell me, you must know the true history. And it's like, there is no true history. There's evidence and there is
his story.
There's evidence and opinion. Yeah. What's your opinion of the evidence? And so it is... I think I would get into big trouble here.
Any part of Argentine history that you want to focus on first, besides Perón?
Well, I originally was going to just do the 20th century because it's so interesting and amazing, right? But I talked to a fabulous guy called Roberto Hirscher. He's a Malvinas war veteran. He wrote a book, The Voyages of the Penelope. So he was on a sailing boat during the Malvinas War, and they ran the blockade, and he wrote a lovely book about it. And his English is
What's
better.
it called?
The Voyages of the Penelope. And
Is it available in English?
It is available in English
Oh.
and in Spanish, and I had to order a copy from Buenos Aires, so you can actually order it here. It's printed here in Buenos Aires.
The Voyage of the Penelope.
The Voyages of
Voyages.
the Penelope. So it was a boat from Patagonia that a German explorer had built, and it ended up in Malvinas, and it was requisitioned during the war. And Roberto, his English is incredible, and there was a big, prioritized English speakers in the forces that went in during the war, and his English is amazing, so he was immediately put in as an interpreter. And I actually heard him on the BBC, and he's it's like, I want to interview on my podcast, and he's an amazing guy. He's now a professor of narrative history in Chile, which is pretty well what I'm doing at the moment. It's like telling history. History is a story.
Sure.
And Roberto said to me, you should do this podcast chronologically. I don't think he meant to go back to Isabella the Catholic, but maybe to Jose de San Martin.
Yeah, maybe to the beginnings of the independence, 1889 or something like that.
Or the creation of the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata. That's where most people would start, the Bourbon reforms. Roberto said that I should go, and I guess I took it literally, and I went to the Viceroyalty, the establishment, but then I had to kept going back and back, because one thing led to another and led to the other, till I ended up in medieval Castile.